Hey guys, it's Amelia Singer here on Ameliarate Through Wine, where I pair wine to international guests based on their palate, personality, and personal story. I am thrilled to announce that this podcast is being vigorously propelled by Rothschild Wine Collection from Good House Wadston. Now, this really is a name synonymous with a century-old legacy of art and wine craftsmanship. I really couldn't think of a better pairing for this wine and culture podcast. From the early 1920s to the present day, the Rothschilds' profound love for both wine and art has been at the center of their journey. The family's artistic heritage distinguishes the label, often giving a unique story which adds an extra dimension to the exceptional wine. With handcrafted bottles created by inspirational artists, mesmerizing wine cellars, and even the family members themselves designing the labels on the wine bottle. The Rothschilds' timeless commitment to the fusion of wine and art is a legacy to inspire wine enthusiasts and wine connoisseurs alike. For more information, visit goodhousewadston.com. And now, sit back, pour yourself a glass, and enjoy. Hey guys, I am super excited to have on the Ameliarate Through Wine podcast today, the wonderfully passionate, innovative, and gorgeous Hannah Harley Young. Now, after running her own photography company for 10 years, Hannah made the brave decision to embrace her other love in life, food, by creating the multimedia platform and company Crazy Sexy Food. And like me, yes, she loves food, but you also grew up with an amazing culinary inspiration from your mixed heritage, which we'll go on to a little bit later. But you also love the conversations, the industry leaders, and the connections with culture that one can experience through food. And I find what you've created in the last 5 years absolutely extraordinary, because you launched your Crazy Sexy Food podcast in 2020, which within the first month was already in UK top 10 charts of podcasts, which is amazing. And then this has since evolved into a multimedia platform full of beautifully short films, which explores your various foodie forays around London with some of the movers and shakers in the London food scene, as well as family members, which I really enjoyed. And whether you are on TV talking about the latest food trends, hosting events at the top foodie festivals, to producing authentic conversations via various mediums, you're basically a force of good and pure inspiration for any creative, entrepreneur, or foodie out there. Hannah, welcome.
Wow. Gosh. I might cry. Hold on. Goodness me, that's so lovely.
Well, no, it's true. It's all true. It's like, I do actually find you so inspired. And in terms of, you do have various interests, but you know what your passions are, you stick to them. And we're going to be asking a little bit more about how you pivoted and have created the wonderful company you have. But I'm actually going to, first of all, really focus on wine.
Yes.
How you got into wine. But before that, I'm going to give you a little taste of your own medicine, because always at the beginning of your podcast, you ask guests what they had for breakfast. Now, I'm not going to do that to you. I'm going to tweak it to this podcast and say, what was the last glass of wine you enjoyed?
Oh, gosh. Okay. Actually, the last glass of wine that I enjoyed was, I have drunk since this said glass, but it was actually, I don't know when this podcast is going out, but it was
next week.
Oh gosh. Okay. Right. So, it was a week ago. So it'll be 2 weeks from this, when this is coming out.
Yeah.
I was watching the Euro finals.
Oh gosh.
By myself.
Oh gosh.
Which actually was just doubly sad. And obviously the result was sad as well. But I was on my way to go and see my parents, but I had just come back from actually a food festival that you were talking about in the intro. I had my 3-month-old baby all packed and ready to leave the house. And I just thought, what am I doing? I'm exhausted. I've got to get him in the car, get him out of the car, get into my parents. I had 45 minutes to do it all. And I had a really beautiful chilled rosé waiting, full bottle, unopened, in the fridge. And I thought, you know what? Life's too short. Yep. I'm going to sit on the sofa, let my baby just sleep, because it was also the idea of waking him up. And you don't want to wake up a sleeping baby. That's all I'm going to say.
Sleeping dogs.
Exactly. And I just cracked open the rosé and I sat there by myself, and I was very, very happy with my life.
No, I'm so glad you said that. I can't wait to bring out the wine, because I want to do a cheers to that. I'm going to pour the wine so we can do a cheers to that.
Sometimes you've just got to take control of your life and just sort of pick your battles.
And I think actually that's probably what everyone needed after watching.
Yeah, well, exactly. I'm not going to lie, there were a few glasses after the actual football as well. So there you go.
Well, I wanted, because when we spoke before, and we're going to talk a little bit more about like kind of your foray into wine, but just to kickstart things, I want to choose a white wine.
Yep.
I wanted to choose, I know that you normally drink red wines, but I thought, you wanted to kind of know more about like summer white wine options. But I also know your real passion, like one of your real passions, which also always appears on your podcast, is your love for crisps.
Yes.
And I know that your favorite crisps are pickled onion Monster Munch. Yes. And it's been such a delight, actually, over the weekend. I was doing various wine with pickled onion Monster Munch research. And I was just seeing everything in sepia. It was great. It brought me back to quite a few decades ago. And I think this wine will go really well with pickled onion Monster Munch. But let's just see what you think at first. So when you think of pickled onion, you're thinking of like crispy, tangy, whatever. This, I think, is a wonderful, slightly spritzy white wine option.
My God, I love the smell of it.
Yeah. Well, cheers to you. Cheers to drinking that rosé with the Euros. And thank you for coming on.
Oh, wow. Okay. I haven't had a white wine like this before.
Okay. So
why is this lovely? Why do I like this?
Well, I also want to choose this wine because it is from like a foodie capital of the world. So we are going to Basque country near San Sebastian. And we're going to the region of Chacoli. So this is a white wine made from the local grape there called one of my favorite grape names, Hondaribi Zuri.
Excuse me, who?
No, Hondaribi Zuri. And the Zuri part means white. So it's like the fact that it's like a white grape. I'm not quite sure what Hondaribi means. But Chacoli, it's a wine region very near San Sebastian. So with this kind of, what I love about this wine, when you see it from Chacoli, and there's 3 appellations, but all of them, regardless of where they come from, see, it's all in Basque here. So that's why all the X's are on the name.
Oh
so
my
this
gosh.
is, I'm going to completely butcher the name.
It's actually a really lovely bottle as well. It's quite slim.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
It's called, okay, guys, don't worry. All the wine info will be in the caption. It's called Chacomin Exchialatzitz.
I'm really glad you're doing that, not me.
And it's from the Gicatorico. Oh, I don't even know where that comes from, but anyway, Chacolina. And so it's from the Chacolina region, the Chacoli region. And the fact is, like always with these wines, they're going to be light white wines made from the normally 100% Hondaribi Zuri grape, not oaked, and they always have like a slight spritz to them.
I can taste the spritz.
Yeah, exactly.
Because when you poured it, I could see like a few very fine bubbles.
It's not like sparkling. It's almost like Badois.
Yes, exactly.
It's that kind of like foamy mousse thing, which I like. So it's very lightly refreshing. Also, this particular area, so there's like 3 areas to Chacoli. The Gittacariaco region.
So that after a few glasses, eh?
This one is... I mean, all of them tend to be light, zippy, zesty. You'll get like citrus peel. But this one is like closest to Cantabrian Sea. So you might even get like a little bit of salinity there. Sometimes people talk about iodine flavors. Yeah, okay. But yeah, there is that kind of saline freshness which comes from the maritime breezes. And they always tend to be quite low in alcohol. They tend to be about 10 to 11% alcohol, which again, if you're drinking white wines in the summer, out in the sunshine, those little 0.5 or 1%, they all add up. So, and it's quite hard with climate change. So yeah, this is actually about 11%. And I just thought it's a really fun, easy drinking thing. And again, if you think of San Sebastian and the pinchos, that's what made me think, okay, yeah, the pickled pinchos, that might go with the pickled onion Monster Munch. I mean, we have the classic
this is
kind of
so
olives.
Clever.
So you can I think we should give it a go.
Yes.
Yeah, grab a packet. I'm so excited.
God, it only took us 5 minutes and we're already on the pickled onion Monster Munch.
Because I was thinking, I was actually looking at my notes, very technical wine notes here. I was like, okay, so when one thinks about Monster Munch, you're thinking about the crunchy texture, the kind of tangy, umami kind of pickled thing, But then, what you can do with food and wine pairing is either you match for match, or you contrast. And with this, what I was trying to do was matching like for like. So this pickled, tangy, crunchy specimen will go with this spritzy, saline, bright, liquid. And
God, this is epic. What have I created? The fact that I am now so like known for this pickled onion monster munch, I don't know what's going to happen.
I mean,
with
you
all
got Paul
this.
Feig. You got Paul Feig into pickled onion monster munch.
I mean, it's just wild. So
yeah.
we're gonna eat it, and then we're gonna.
For food and wine tasting, what you should do is, first of all, so we do a sniffy sniff of the wine. You get that kind of, I would say, like light, like kind of appley citrus, maybe slightly like kind of saline finish. Aroma. Then you want a little slurpy slurp. And it kind of peps up the palate with those lovely little Badois-like bubbles. And then you take a bite of the Monster Munch. And then you go back to the wine.
I'm going back. Don't you worry. I'm going to be drunk by the end of the intro, chat.
Do you see? Yes. But actually, this is deceptive. It has really intense fruit, which can match up to the pickled onion, because that has that kind of saline tang, which can match up to the pickle.
Okay.
And then I think the Badois bubbles kind of cleanse the palate, but also the crispiness of the Monster Munch kind of melts away. Yeah, it kind of melts away into the Badois bubbles. I mean, I'm never gonna
look at a Monster Munch again in the same way. And I've realised I can only now eat Monster Munch with this wine.
I mean, most people have wine and crisps.
Yeah.
This is a perfect, I just wanted to set you up for summer, Hannah. So I thought I would do that with the first wine.
Oh, I'm definitely set up. You just leave me here.
And actually, it's great. It's available. I know you get stuff from Ocado.
Yes.
It's available on Ocado.
Fantastic.
It's normally £16.50, but it's actually on offer for £14.
I'm like, okay. Well, great, because I'm already starting to do my order today.
Yes.
There we go. It's going on. Boom. It's going on the shop. Wow. Okay. And what's interesting as well, I just would never go down this route.
I mean, also, because I wouldn't really know on the name. Yeah. Like, you don't know the grape, you don't know the region. It's all written in Basque, which is meant to be one of the most obscure languages in the world. Most difficult, actually, apparently, to speak up there with Hungarian. So yeah, I guess I really wanted to kind of spread the word of these kind of light, spritzy, yet flavorful and very gastronomic. I mean, when you think of all the different tapas and pinchos you have in San Sebastian, this can stand up to it, but also cleanse the palate.
Okay. So, Sold.
Great. Well, we'll now get back into how you actually got into wine, because we've now seen how your wine journey has evolved. But we're going to go back to the roots. And I know, you have a very creative family, which is awesome. And you credit your Iranian mother with kind of giving you the best introduction education to food. And I was wondering, did wine feature at the family table when you grew up?
It did. And I think I'm probably just going to expose my parents completely, and social services will most definitely be on the phone to them at some point. But I grew up in a very sort of bohemian family. So it was, my dad's a bit of an old age hippie. My mum was kind of this 70s disco diva from, back in the day. And, my mum and my dad both loved to entertain. But what was so wonderful is that when they were having these dinner parties, I was always involved. So there was never sort of carting me up off to bed or, sending me away from the house for the night. I was always kind of part of the whole thing. And from the moment that my mum was going out and doing the food shopping for the night, to selecting her wines, to laying the table, to knowing that I had a place at that table, you can imagine. I mean, I would have been 8 years old, and I was sitting with like 40-something-year-olds, which...
It's very European.
It is very European, but a lot of my friends from school didn't really understand the life that I was growing up in. I didn't have any issues with it. I didn't sort of feel a way about that. But in terms of like bringing it back to the wine, I was always allowed a little sip. Again, very European.
Yeah. My father
or if
did
we
the
went
same.
out for dinners, which, I was very lucky to be taken out for lovely dinners. Again, it was sort of a sip. Did I like the taste of wine at the age of 8, 9, 10? No. But the point is that I was allowed to make that sort of, I was allowed to try it.
And you probably had very positive associations with it, because then it wasn't just about the alcohol. It's like, oh no, but I've been included in this family meal or this social gathering, which again is much more holistic.
Totally. And I'm definitely going to throw my mum under the bridge as well, in that knowing that I grew up, my mum would come home, both of my parents, self-employed, owned a business. My mum would come home most evenings and have a glass.
Yeah.
She's going to love that. But, the point is that, but it was a positive it was a positive experience that I was around. And it was celebrated. And it wasn't that, wine necessarily came up for special occasions. It was just there.
Yeah.
So I didn't really think, it was just part of our life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I really like that.
I love that. That's definitely what I can completely relate to everything you're saying. And then also around the table, because like I mentioned that, you have an Iranian mother and then a Jewish father. So
Yes.
there's also this wonderful kind of melange of different cuisines and culture around that table too. Do you think that is also just that engagement with food and wine that has what's made you really interested, not just in the product, but also kind of the stories, the traditions and the culture which go
100%.
behind?
I mean, when you think about sort of Judaism's relationship to wine, one of my first memories would be kind of being at like Passover dinner. My auntie is quite religious and, we'd go to theirs for Passover and the passing of Jewish wine. I think sometimes I was tried to be given grape juice and I was like, no, give me the good stuff, which is obviously a very sweet wine.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've tried it, but, it was, I'd say like the culture. I mean, my mother is Iranian. And again, it wasn't necessarily her Iranianness. It was more how she had conducted her younger life, that her culture of wine and then my dad's culture, I think they meshed well together.
Yeah.
And yeah, as I said, like it was just it's funny because when I look back, it's not something that I necessarily thought about, but it was just around.
Yeah.
Like having a good time and dinner parties and just socializing and celebration, or maybe not celebration over food, was just what I knew.
Yeah, because even if it's like funerals or just like whatever, but it's that coming together.
Totally. Yeah. And I think that's kind of what I've run with the conversation of food. And I've always said this as sort of like to anyone who asks me why I started what I started, is that for me, it was about talking about anything over food. And that was really important for me growing up. I think one thing that my mother really instilled in us that I hope that I can recreate with my son is we would always sit down for dinner every night. No matter who was at the table, whether if my dad was out working, fine, which he was most weeknights, it was always my mum, and it was always at least one of my brothers. I have two brothers, and we would sit at the table, and it wasn't necessarily about the fact that it was exciting food. It was just, this was like the 90s, early 2000s, where food was becoming exciting, I think, in the UK. But we would talk. It was communicating over food. We were talking about, she was asking me how my day at school was. I could have had a really bad day at school. It was about the conversation. And I think that for me is so important, that you can have any conversation over food. And
like, I think it's also meant to be seen as a life enhancer. And like that for me, like, that's why it was like strange during COVID when I was trapped at home and just drinking. Like I never would have drunk wine on my own at home before. Obviously I get sent samples, but it was like the first time I'm like, oh, and like, I really wanted to like check myself, because I'm like, okay, I'm like trapped on my own in LA, can't see anyone for like, end up being a year. But, I never wanted that relationship to change. It's like, it doesn't matter.
But I think that was one thing that I think a lot of people struggled with in COVID, which was not just I want to see my friends, but it was, I just want to either go out and have just a simple meal somewhere with a friend, or I want to have people over for dinner. Like we lost that art of connection. Yeah. And for me, the art of connection is always over food and drink. Yeah. And that's what I think was really lost big time.
And I think we're still trying to get that.
I think we're sort of getting there. I mean, ish.
Moving on from like sad COVID chat. But you mentioned actually like kind of food from the 90s and how food has obviously evolved, and particularly in London, like London now is, and which you cover so well in your podcast and in your films, the London food scene has just completely evolved in a really spectacular fashion. I would say definitely in the last 10 years and actually 5 years. Actually, COVID has been interesting kind of for that. But just as like, the food scenes evolve, our palates can evolve with food and what we like. How has yours evolved with wine? Because you mentioned that like when you first had it, you were like, meh. I'm more like just being around my friends and family. Yeah. How would you say that your own wine journey has evolved throughout the years?
I think I've always been a late starter in life, in everything.
Yeah, me too.
I was like the girl that was the last one to kiss a boy. I was the last one Anyway, we're not going to go down there. Actually, give me a few more drinks. I'll probably tell you all the things that I was last at. But one of the things that I was really last at was actually appreciating wine. So back to like those dinner parties where I might be allowed a little sip. That was it. And then we kind of have like a bit of a gap between, let's say, 10 to 15, 16, where I don't really remember much involvement of wine in my life. Again, probably just the odd sip if I was at dinner. And then you kind of get to like, actually, no, 15, 16. Okay, you're starting to go out. You can kind of get into a pub with like a fake ID, and you start drinking cheap white wine. I don't know about you, but for me, that was just a rite of passage. Of being a young girl in London.
Just ubiquitous Pinot Grigio.
I mean,
or like
shocking
anything
scenes.
which worked with ice.
Absolutely. I mean, but it was shocking. It was like, but what did I know?
Yeah.
I also probably was trying to act a bit cool in front of my friends who I was genuinely thought that they actually enjoyed what they were drinking. I'm sure they probably didn't as well. But we wanted to feel adults.
Yeah.
Like you wanted to be like, you wanted to feel a bit glamorous.
Yeah.
And the idea of glamorous for me was sitting in a pub with a glass of cheap white wine.
Yeah.
But what that did was unfortunately set the standard so low for white wine in particular that I think I spent a good 5 years having acid reflux from such awful acidic white wine.
Probably PTSD. Probably acid reflux brought on by PTSD.
Shocking. And also some horrendous hangovers that I'm not going to go into detail about. And so I don't think my love really started until about maybe my mid-20s, when I probably was a bit more mature.
You probably have a bit more money to spend on wine. I think that makes a difference.
And I was probably around maybe other people. Again, I was still, I know we'll get onto this, but I was still very much a photographer at the time. I wasn't thinking about getting into the food world in sort of at 25, but I was starting to kind of understand, okay, I don't need to spend like, in these days, I don't know if you can find it either, it was £4 for like a glass of wine in certain places. Long gone are those days.
I know.
But, and I think I started to have an appreciation. And I think that was what it was, is actually I can go out, I can maybe look at a wine list. Did I understand the wine list? Not at all. But I was asking questions. I think that's what it was. I was asking whoever, the waiter or the sommelier, whatever it was,
But I think that also comes with confidence in oneself too, because no one is brought up, like even if you're brought up with wine, like with family, like in Italian regions or whatever, you're not going to know all the other wines out there, and necessarily, I would love to be like Jamie Oliver and bring in like wine tasting for schools. Yeah. But
can you imagine? They probably do that in some like remote place in Italy or something.
Or they probably don't in a finishing school in Switzerland.
Yeah, exactly.
I just can't see it happening here. But yeah, like how are you meant to know? And it's only by trying things out.
Totally. And I think, but that was also my relationship with white wine. Red wine was a no-go. Like I did not like red wine. It was never going to happen. And then something happened when I was 29. I was approaching my 30th birthday. And I think that I associated red wine as something quite mature. I never saw sort of 16-year-olds drinking a glass of red wine. No. So something, I don't know what it was. It's like the stars aligned. The world knew I was turning 30 and suddenly my palate changed. And I started like wanting to order a glass of red wine. Or if I was out with my mum, who does love red wine, I would have a sip of hers and be like, oh, actually, no, I do like that. No, I don't like that one. And I actually remember saying this I had a big 30th, I love a big party.
Yeah, me too.
And I actually love my birthday and I always celebrate it.
Yes. Mine is in 3 Well, it's Monday. It's coming up in 2 days. Everyone on social media is going to know about it, though.
We all know about it. And also, when is your birthday? It's on another special day.
It's on International Tequila Day, 24th of July.
Woo!
But we love wine too.
Yeah, forget about that. But I actually mentioned it I did a speech on my birthday, and I remember saying, I know I'm turning 30 because I finally started enjoying red wine, and now I love red wine.
It's almost like a coming of age thing.
That's what I'm saying. And so actually, you've surprised me with this because I never order white wine.
I know, I was a bit nervous serving you this, to be honest.
Yeah.
And like,
I would 100% be buying this.
But I think it's also context too. It's like when you're like, oh, yeah, I remember like, I can see this with pinchos and tapas and like, oh yeah, I can appreciate it's got these tangy notes and whatever. And like, what are the foods I love? Like, I think most things in life need context and like also what you and I both love is also the stories and everything else. And of course, things should just be able to be hopefully appreciated on their own. But I think particularly with wine, you need sometimes extra context. Before we move on to the next wine, which is another white, which I hope you like. We've talked about how palates have evolved. You said how food has evolved, but I'm really curious, particularly from the work which you've been doing for the last 5 years of Crazy Sexy Food. How do you think that the food scene has evolved in England, but I guess mainly I would say London for you?
I mean, listen, I'm not trying to be an expert in anything. So this is purely my own opinions. And I know that
you've interviewed so many amazing industry stalwarts.
I have. I've got to meet a lot of chefs. And I would say that actually I would probably put it down to more over the past 10 to 15 years.
15 years, yeah.
I would say that the food scene has changed. Every chef that I interview, especially the ones that have kind of been going on for a while, the UK had a really bad rep for food.
Oh my gosh, my American family and friends were so mean.
Yeah,
for years.
We just, up until I would say the 90s.
I would even go.
Well, the thing is,
there's still some residue.
There was residue, but what was happening kind of in the 90s that you were starting to see a lot of these very well-known chefs rising up the ranks. For example, people like Marco Pio White. And I have been very lucky to interview him, and it was a very interesting interview. But the point is that you were kind of getting this, we were starting to see what we now call the celebrity chef. And he was one of the first. And suddenly he was cooking French food, but he was cooking in the UK and he is an English guy. But it was our brains, I think, were sort of reconfiguring because suddenly food was being appreciated. It wasn't just like what I was served in the early 90s. I love you, Mum, but one particular dish that she used to serve me that is so unacceptable was gammon with a ring of pineapple.
Oh my God.
And I promise my mum is a phenomenal cook, but this was very of the time. And so I would say nowadays, my gosh, I will 100% battle this to the ground that I think London in particular, but also the UK in general, is at the peak of some of the best food in the world. And that is down to the fact that we have such a multicultural society. So people are now suddenly given the opportunities to open up, whether it's street food stalls. Yeah. When I was growing up, I didn't know what Ethiopian food was. No. I didn't know that there were different types of Indian food.
Or even Chinese, different types of Chinese.
Exactly. So, and in fact, one of my favorite Chinese spots, what we're used to in the UK or in the Western world is Cantonese Chinese, which is your Peking duck pancakes and your sweet and sour chicken or whatever. Go and try Szechuan Chinese, which is...
But I find that so spicy.
I love it.
See, I struggle.
It's hand-pulled noodles and broths and numbing oil, which makes your tongue go, I didn't know about that growing up. Now the opportunities are so vast. And as I said, we have different cultures, and finally, they're having a part to say in the industry.
And I think there's different price points too. As you mentioned, there's markets, there's street food. And I almost feel I'm really curious what you feel about these kind of what used to be really big, Michelin-starred restaurants with white tablecloths, and how they're now actually Michelin, it doesn't necessarily have to come with all of that. And actually, what does Michelin really mean when I see about some of the top-rated chefs at the moment who've completely eschewed that business model?
Absolutely. I mean, listen, I think that every chef and every sort of level of restaurant and every cuisine has its place.
Yeah, but I like how we have everything.
Yeah, but for me and sort of my peers and the people that I know and hang out with, I would say that palates have changed. I think we are slightly stepping away from that very sort of stiff starch tablecloth, formal, sort of classical music playing in the background and someone walking around in a tuxedo with white gloves and everything. I don't, me on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis, that's not the food that I'm craving. The food I'm craving is just really delicious food that has been cooked with love from the heart, from the soul, might have a story, might just be a bowl of steaming noodles off of some dark alleyway in Carnaby Street. That's the food that I crave. Yeah. I have been to a few Michelin-starred restaurants. I don't necessarily source them out and go to them, but even some of the restaurants that I've been to in London, even those restaurants, very super high end, the whole tasting menu situation, they're stepping away from sort of the white tablecloth look. And there's one place I've been to and I've actually interviewed her, which is Claire Smith, who owns Core, around the corner from you.
Yeah.
I think, listen, and I have questioned her on it. It's a very expensive restaurant. It is absolutely, for a very small percentage of people, because it is so expensive. But if you ever do get the opportunity to go or just to step inside, what she has done has kind of like changed the game a little bit, in the sense that when you go in, it's like rock and roll music is playing, or like Take That are playing. Like it's very like commercial music. Yeah. There are no tablecloths. In fact, I think the tables are made of leather.
Interesting.
It's relaxed. And she has said, there's no dress code.
Oh, wow.
She has people come in who come in shorts and a t-shirt.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I think that that's kind of allowing people to realize that we're not on this pedestal. It's not for a certain person. Yes, I understand it's expensive. And
it's a certain experience.
It's an experience.
But it's not for just one group.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think, I would like to see more restaurants and more chefs of that caliber doing something like that. Obviously, the conversation of price point is a whole different conversation. And I obviously have my views on that. But I also understand that now, being in the industry, I sort of have this weird sort of foot in and foot out, where I understand why prices are so high, but equally I'm still a paying customer. Yeah. And I also get the frustration that it is expensive to eat out now. I think it's a huge privilege to eat out now, even on like a very sort of high street level. I can name brands, I assume, but even totally. Just like going to Nando's is expensive. Like it used to, I could use
Pret.
Don't get me started with
Pret. My lunch has totally changed.
Okay, listen, all I'm saying is Pret used to be like £2.50, £3 for a sandwich. Yes. It's now £6.50 for like a club sandwich.
Yeah, I've seen this.
Do better. Okay, I'm not getting any sort of Pret. Oh well. But do you know what I mean? The point is, I get it. I see both sides. I get the frustration. I also understand why the prices are being put up. It's a really difficult situation that we're in.
How do you see it being resolved, or how do you see it going forward?
I honestly, right now, I don't know. I don't have an answer, because it brings into a whole other conversation of what's going on in the world, and it's complicated.
It is complicated.
It's complicated.
So
I don't know. Do you see it with wines?
Yes.
Have wines gone up?
Absolutely. Wines have gone up, and wine lists, and even like wines by the glass, but even just like in terms of supermarket wines, and they're really struggling, like from Brexit. And I was like, I love how when you came over, I was like, well, we're not going to go into politics in this podcast. But this just goes to show.
We sort of want to tap into it.
But this just goes to show wine and food is absolutely integral to the cultural zeitgeist. Yeah. So when I say like I'm a wine culturist or whatever, it's not me being like Ponzi. It's like, no, like it is not immune. It's not like in its like own little bubble from the world. It absolutely like is part of what is happening in everyday life. And it is a struggle, and we have made it very costly. Huge admin issues with Brexit as well. I go to a few international wine fairs. I speak to people who are like, we love the UK, but we just can't be like, it's just too much of a headache to send our wines over to you guys.
But also on like a really like basic level, and I'm going to get all of these figures wrong, but I'm just going to give you an idea. I speak to a lot of chefs who have restaurants or restaurateurs, whatever they are. And it used to be the standard that your bread and butter would be free. It was put on the table, when you go to a restaurant. You will find that most restaurants now will charge for bread and butter.
Oh, totally.
And the reason being, and it's not because of the bread, it's because of the cost of flour. So we're talking, they are getting these sacks of flours that originally cost X amount, and now they're 3 times the price. So it's actually got to a point where they have to charge for the bread, and it's a really difficult one, because for me, even I still have that mindset that I'm like, I'm actually so hungry to get to dinner. I have a bit of the bread and butter. Yeah. But then you're charging me like £5 for the bread and butter. And I'm like, well, maybe I'll just wait and just order all the starters. It's really, it's a really difficult situation that we're in. And as I said, I keep repeating myself, but I get both sides, and I don't know what the answer is. But I hope that with time, things will calm down a little bit, things will resolve itself in some shape or form.
And again, as you say, like, I think if people just realize it's an experience, it's like going to the theatre. It's like going to
whatever. That's what eating out has become now, is that where I think it used to be that you could pop out a few nights a week, whether it was Nando's all the way up to, you know, like a new hot restaurant that's just opened. I think now it's become super luxury. And, you know, even for us, okay, forget about the fact that I've had a baby, small detail. You know, I'm very particular about how much I go out now, because when you start adding alcohol into the equation, whatever, it's expensive to eat out.
It is. So I guess the only like flip side of that is it makes people think really hard, you know, where they want to go. Yeah. I think it makes restaurants and wine bars or whatever, they have to pull out the full stops.
And listen, it is my greatest love is eating out. Yeah. Like I get still so excited going to a new restaurant, going to a restaurant that I go to all the time. I love nothing more than eating out. It's that simple. And I will continue, and I will make sure that I continue loving it to the day I die, because for me, it is a luxury. But it's the ethos of everything that I'm about.
Exactly. It's one of like life's greatest connectors, and it will remain so. Yeah. Well, after that, I'm going to move on to something a bit different, but equally as, I would say, topical, nuanced. I'm sure we'll have plenty to say.
I'm already tipsy. I don't know about you. Crack open the next bottle.
So Hannah's just said that I'm extremely brave for serving her another white wine because, as we've heard, whites are not your natural go-to.
No.
But I always get excited because I'm like, you can't be grapist, you can't be, you know, like you have to be cute. You know, there's always something for everyone out there in the wonderfully wide and diverse world of wine. And you had sent me 2 or 3 pictures of white wines that you had enjoyed. Yes. And I noticed that there was a kind of trend where you liked wines which didn't even if they did have acidity, they would still have to have good body. And I'm like you, I like something, when people talk about light-bodied wines, that's like skimmed milk being washed around your, if you had that. Medium-bodied wines would be like semi-skimmed milk, and full-bodied wines would be more like custard or cream.
Love that.
And you tended to be more on the medium to full-bodied kind of wines.
Really? Creamy. Is that me?
Yeah, but it have to be balanced, with like good acidity and enough fruit there. I was a bit nervous for the first one that you would find the acidity high, but I think like the soft bubbles kind of.
There was no acid in that. I could definitely do the full bottle of that.
No, well, and now you've got your Ocado order to do, so that's great. But this white wine I have brought out, so I always try and champion a supermarket with one of the wines, and then I champion an importer. So the first one, as I mentioned, it was like from Ocado. And then the next 2 wines are from this wonderful online wine retailer who I used to work with called Swig.
Brilliant name.
Brilliant name, brilliant people. And I love them because it's a small company, but they tend to work with boutique wineries from around the world, normally still family run. And yes, they do some very wonderful traditional French and Italian wines, but then they also do some things which are slightly off-piste. Okay. And I was kind of thinking about you, and I was like linking it to the fact that you have kind of mixed heritage, the fact that you've had to take certain risks and things in your career, and persevering through adversity. Okay. And I would also say it's quite a complex white wine, which it's found now in all kinds of restaurants in the UK. So you might have gone to some of the restaurants which it appeared in, but before I tell you too much, I'm just curious what you think. So this one, I always say like swirly. So it's a blend of Sauvignon Blanc and Chardonnay. Okay. And it has not been put into oak because they want to keep the purity. But when you smell it, you might get a little bit of grassiness from Sauvignon. But
it's quite sort of, I'm going to try and speak like I'm a connoisseur. But it smells quite sort of perfume. It's like, it's lovely. It's completely different smell from the first one.
Yeah. So, I mean, from the Sauvignon Blanc, you do get like a little bit of grassiness. I also kind of got baked pineapple rings on it. I also kind of got, I'm like now looking for my notes. I was like, oh yeah.
Pineapple.
Yeah. I was like, ooh, it smells like candied pineapple. And there's like a little bit of bay leaf. It's a little bit grassy, but then when you taste it, what I like is it's very creamy. When I was talking about medium to full bodied, this is like a medium to full-bodied white. It's kind of creamy, succulent. You have kind of herbal, like a really sweet herbal spicy note, which I like.
This is beautiful. Mm-hmm. This is really good. Okay. Am I a white wine drinker now?
Yes.
Oh my God, I don't believe it.
So we are actually traveled to Syria.
Wow.
So this is actually Syria's only private estate made wine.
Bloody hell. Am I allowed to swear on this podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, it's fucking great.
Swig are all about championing stories and culture stuff. And so these guys are amazing. So they actually have to operate. It's run by a family. The family actually have to live in Beirut, but they set up the winery in 2006, and it's in kind of the hills of Bargelis, which is very near the port of what used to be known as Antioch. So kind of where Hellenistic Judaism met Christianity. It's where Saul had his Damascene moments. I kind of thought with your mixed background too, and with Syria and Iran or whatever, I was just like, okay, that part of the world. But they had really wanted to go over there because despite all the challenges which they've had in the past in the 50s and 60s and losing various land and whatever, they've always known since Roman times that this has been an area for grape growing. And so they were determined to pay a homage to the past, but also by keeping a finger on the pulse. So actually all of that they got in a consultant to help them. I'm going to mispronounce his name, Stefan Darren Oncourt. And with the assistance of him basically producing wine since 2006. But since 2011, due to civil war, they had to leave Syria. Wow. And now, I mean, it's insane because their offices are in Beirut.
Right. Another great place.
Yeah. But they have to be talking to the pickers by phone, telling them when to pick. The grapes then have to go into taxis over the border. They have to bring it's an amazing story. So they basically, the city of Antioch has been, making wine for, since the beginning of like kind of Christianity and Hellenistic Judaism. And now, just because I don't want to get it wrong. So they also have had issues. So as well as the war and as well as, just having all these logistical issues in terms of harvesting, in terms of picking, in terms of getting their grapes to them, even exporting has been really difficult because in Syria, winery equipment is difficult to source and spare parts have to be discreetly brought in by taxi. And like the actual winemaking is also done over the internet.
Oh my gosh.
And so then for the brothers to assess, they have to send over samples of the wine and the grapes to the brothers in Beirut. And even now too, what used to be a relatively easy journey to export their wines, because like the wines would just be sent to Lebanon and then on to Europe. Now they have to go through various ports. So like every single bit of the process is a complete logistical.
So just to have this lovely bottle is like quite an honor.
It's an honor, and they actually lose wine on every single bit of, because there's so much work which goes into it. They actually lose money on every single bottle produced, but thanks to that other family businesses, that is what keeps this winery afloat. And they're determined. And even though they've recently just due to fighting stuff, they've like lost their family home. In Syria, whatever, they're still like, no, they will never, ever take our vines away from us. You can't just pack up your vines and put them on your back. Okay. You have to keep on making wine.
Okay.
So this is actually, it's a beautiful wine. It's from 2017. I wanted to show you a white wine, which is complex, and it just shows you it doesn't need oak to age because that is still so full of perfume, fruit, freshness, but the slight age has given it that curd-like texture, which I love. And it's a Sauvignon Blanc Chardonnay. It's called Bargelis, because it's Domaine de Bargelis. And then they make a white wine from Sauvignon Blanc and Chardonnay. And then they make a red wine, which is a Cabernet blend, which is fantastic also. And it's about 33, 34 pounds, which again, when you think about the complexity, the nuances, the adversity.
Yeah.
To be able to enjoy this wine and have this, on our table, it's amazing.
But also it's what I've sort of got from that is there's a really beautiful story behind it. And although a story a little bit of sort of fighting for kind of what you want to, in this instance, create, I would want to part with my money and support something like that. Kind of similar when I hear stories or if I'm interviewing people who have restaurants or anything within the food or culinary industry, I would want to support said person or said business or brand because there's a story behind it.
Exactly.
Like I'm buying into that.
Absolutely.
You know?
And I think it holds on. So absolutely, you will see this at Ahmad's Syrian restaurant.
Yeah.
But then,
Yeah.
But then they're like, this is not meant to be an ethnic wine. Like, so you'll see it in the Michelin, Claude Bossy's restaurant in Bibendum, you know, the Michelin star restaurant, like you'll see it there. So their whole thing is like, this should absolutely stand and occupy its own place and like be up there amongst the best burger, like, you know, it'll stand on a wine list with all of those. But then I think you're right too, when people hear the story, that then just like makes you want to invest in it too.
Do you get many like great wines like this from that part of the world? I mean, I'm a bit ignorant to sort of, you know, Middle Eastern wines.
Yeah, I mean, so they were inspired actually by Lebanon because they suddenly realized like in Lebanon, they were making great wines in the Bekaa Valley and also in the Golan Heights.
There's a taste in it and I'm trying to find out what it is, but it reminds me of something. There's a taste, and this is going to sound ridiculous, but there's a taste in the middle, not the first taste and not the sort of the aftertaste. There's something in the middle that reminds me of something that I used to eat, and it's bringing back a nostalgic memory. And I think that's why I'm really loving it as well.
Is it like, because there's various things, there's like a kind of sweet herbal spice, like you could say like rosemary, or you could say like I don't know, Bailey, like I don't know, like something.
I'm definitely getting that pineapple though.
That pineapple,
that is wild. When you said it, that's what I was like, oh my God, that's it.
And like, that's the thing. Cause again, I think it probably comes from scrubland there, which I haven't been. Like, this is the thing, like why wine is so personal, because like, you know, I bet if I had been there and I could have like seen the scrubland, and, you know, it's like when people talk about Garrigue and Provence, it's that scrubland. It's that kind of resinous herbal spice, which you get in Provence rosé.
Yeah.
And like, this is why I'm like, one day, hopefully I'll get over to Syria.
You're changing my life, Amelia. You're changing my life.
But no, this is so great. But the thing is, it just goes to show, I think lots of people, they just don't like, you know, it's just like hard to know, like, oh, I know I like this, I know I like this, but it's finding the coherent narrative and being like, oh yeah, there's a reason, there's a consistency. So at the end of this, I'll give you like the kind of main descriptors for you to go away.
Thank you.
When you get to restaurants.
Now I feel I'll have a bit more confidence in like ordering wine.
All you need is 2 or 3 adjectives.
Fine. Okay.
Yeah.
And hopefully a waiter or whoever it is who sort of knows what they're doing.
Someone in an independent wine shop.
Fine. Okay, great. Perfect.
Exactly. But no, I'm so glad you enjoyed that. And well, I kind of asked you it already a little bit in the first question, but actually this fits in quite well. You know, you've always worked with various mediums, like whether it's camera, like, you know, kind of still photos, behind the camera or in front of the camera, or podcasts, even like filmed and unfilmed. But has it always been the stories behind the people and the culture which got you interested? Even like from the beginning when you were a photographer and you were doing like, I think more like kind of parties and events and that kind of thing. Was it more trying to set the scene and the cultural associations? I mean,
so it's a funny one because I look back on the main part of my photography career with such happiness and such positivity, because, you know, I still every so often dabble into it, but it was a solid 10 years that really defined all of my 20s, part of my 30s. And it was always about people. I only photographed people. I wasn't a still life photographer. Yeah. I sometimes worked with a few brands and did product photography, but really and truly, everything I've done my whole life has been about people, which is so interesting looking back in hindsight as to now where I've come to at this point. Would I say that it was about the stories? Yes and no. The nature of what I was doing with the photography side of things, particularly with sort of like the parties and sort of a lot of celebrities. Yeah. Everything was very quick. It was, you know, you can imagine you're an event, you know, you're not spending time with these people. You're not having a studio session. And actually that was what I was craving, is that it was, in a sense, I felt like I think I had a good eye. I think I do have a good eye as a photographer. I think that as far as I'm concerned, there are 2 types of photographers. There are very technical photographers who know their craft and they know their cameras and they know every sort of button and this, that, and the other. And you have the people who are the more creative,
intuitive.
Exactly. Yeah. I was the latter. I had a good eye. I was not very technical. And I'm happy to admit that. I just, not that I would just sort of point and shoot.
But it's the same thing in acting. It's the same thing with all of these things.
It was just, I knew where my strengths were. And I think that what I was craving with the photography was that I was spending seconds with my subjects and then we move on. And so that's when I started doing a lot more studio photography, and I sort of created I was lucky to have access to a studio, and I started shooting a lot more portraiture. And I noticed in those moments and those hours or two or whatever that I was spending with these people, I was starting to kind of get a bit more of an essence of who they were. So actually some of the best photos that I was taking in the studio weren't necessarily the ones when they were posed, is when we were having a conversation and I'd be behind the camera and we're talking and I've made them laugh in that moment, and that's the shot.
And you capture them.
And for me, that is so super exciting, and something that I was, and definitely I think played a part in me becoming quite, not irritated, but frustrated with the industry, was that I pride myself, and I would hope that people would say this about me, that I'm very like, what you see is what you get. I'm a very real person. I'm very down to earth. And I was like that as a photographer. Yeah. Suddenly, from sort of, if you think that Instagram was coming out in around 2012, I think that it massively has altered the photography industry. Yeah. Whatever facet of the photography world you were sort of working in. For me, when I was working in celebrity photography, event photography, portrait photography, there was this huge shift that was going on. And I would say now definitely over the past 10 years, in that one, filters. Suddenly everybody wanted to be, and we've had airbrushing for years. Yeah. That's not new, but suddenly you were starting to see people put pictures up of themselves where actually they didn't look like the actual person. So the demands as a photographer were changing, because they were like, well, why are those photos not necessarily looking at the ones that I can shoot on my phone or something? And I'm like, well, that's because I don't shoot with a filter. Okay. Number two, suddenly, particularly with sort of celebrity events, why would they pay for a photographer when you had this new word, influencers, now rising up the ranks, who were taking their own photos?
Yeah. When did they come about?
I would say from for me, maybe 2015 was like a really big sort of pivotal moment. Maybe a year before, I'd say 2015, 2016. And suddenly I wasn't shooting what I call a celebrity. I was shooting influencers. I have no issue with anyone or what everyone does. But the point is that the word celebrity has very much shifted over the past 8 or so years.
Well, they say that now there's no such thing as like a Hollywood star. Well,
we've kind of slightly lost the essence of Hollywood glamour. And so there were all these different things that were going on. And so I was really fighting, again, like what you're saying, where were these stories? Where were these interactions with these really interesting people? Yeah. And I felt like I was losing it. And I felt like, I just felt the industry was changing. And I guess
that must have been so sad.
It is, in a way. I mean, I look back now and it wasn't necessarily sadness, but then also I have to be completely honest. I went into photography, my dad's a photographer.
He's a very well-known photographer.
He's not a bad photographer. He's good. He's had this illustrious career coming up to 50 years. Yeah. I never, ever wanted to recreate what he was doing. I never wanted to be a photographer, Amelia. This was the point. And I'm not saying that I sort of forced myself to do it, but I wanted to get into fashion photography. When I realized that I was into photography, I was like, I want to be a fashion photographer. I want to start shooting editorial. I realized, and I'm a savvy businesswoman. I knew that, and we're talking years ago, by the way, we're not talking nowadays. So I don't know what the entry of getting into the fashion photography world is like these days. But when my day and age, I had to go and earn 50 quid a week to be someone's assistant. And it would be the lucky 1% that were ever going to make it. Yeah. I wasn't interested in that. Yeah. I wanted to go and make a career for myself. And so I did my degree, hated my degree. I'm not going to badmouth anyone, but I really struggled with my degree, tried to leave 3 times. And I was like, oh no, you know what, sod it. I'm going to be the only one in my family that's going to get a degree. Let me just stick it out. I spent a year after my degree actually not picking a camera up. Eventually I was like, I'm not making any money. What am I doing? All my friends are slowly getting into their careers. So I did quite reluctantly pick the camera back up again. Yeah. So I think inherently there was a slight bit of resentment behind it for the first couple of years that I was like, I'm just doing this to make money. And then I started realizing, actually, I'm quite good at this. And then I was realizing, actually, Hannah, you're in a very privileged position where, particularly when I'm working with very high, what's the word? When I'm working with celebrities, I had the trust, and the trust was because of who my dad was.
Yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong. I will never sit here and say, oh, I did it all myself. My dad very much opened the doors, but I had to go through those doors. And in my opinion, and from what my experience was like, I think I had to work doubly as hard to prove myself, because what I had on my shoulders was, oh, it's just Richard's daughter. All right. Yeah. Well, she'll be here for a couple of years. And, I was made a mockery of people. I would leave certain jobs in tears because of the way that I was treated. Yes. Because I was 22 years old. I was a female. I was the only female shooting celebrity parties in London at the time. Everyone else was male. They were sort of, middle-aged men, which was my dad. That's fine. I have no issues with that. But the way I was treated in some instances was very disrespectful. And I also, and I'm trying to give some people the benefit of the doubt here, I kind of understood why they were probably treating me in that way. I get it. They'd been working very bloody hard to get to where they were, but I was also working very hard to get to where I was. And I knew that the door was open for me, but I was working very hard to prove myself. And then I think after a couple of years, I did start gaining trust and I did start gaining respect. And suddenly my career kind of took off. And I think that was the USP. I was this young female on the scene, and I sort of I used to create these little press releases about myself, and I'd say, Hannah shows up, her camera bag isn't a camera bag, it's like a lovely handbag, and she dresses like she's a guest, so she kind of like blends in with the crowd, and people loved it, and it was great, and I traveled the world with it, and it was amazing. And then I think, as I said, like there was that sort of pivotal time around, I'd say between let's say 2015-ish, but there was this big change in the industry. And I think that underlying thought, which was that, do I really want to do this for the rest of my life? I always knew that I was never going to be a photographer the rest of my life. I knew it when I started out. I knew it in the middle when I was at the peak. I know it now as I'm kind of like leaving or exiting. I just knew that it was never going to be my story, the rest of my story.
But it's part, it's chapter.
But it's part of, and it is incredible, and it was an amazing part of my life. But I do think the industry has massively changed. But one positive I will say is that I see a lot more females on the scene now.
I was going to say, I was going to ask about that,
because we take bloody good photos because we know how to shoot.
Yeah, I know. Yes.
And I do think, and I'm not trying to get on my soapbox here, but I do think I noticed that, particularly when I was shooting a lot of portraiture, females do like to be shot by females. We just have that slight attention to detail.
Yeah.
And that we had fun with it.
You have an instant intuition how someone would want to be portrayed.
Totally. Like, I get the angles. I get the, let's not go from that profile. So, I just get it because I'm one, I get it. Because I too will have photos taken of me and I'm like, nope, hate that. No. Oh, I like that. And oh, no, you look awkward in that. I mean, let's be honest, 9 times out of 10, I probably don't like pictures of me, but I get it. So,
well, I think actually it's quite interesting because everyone's like, you've got to love what you do. But I think actually what's quite interesting is you've always known why you've done something, got the most out of it, but you're not so obsessive or one-track minded that you kind of have always been like, actually, this is no longer serving me.
Yeah.
And so actually that sounds like a very healthy way to kind of take the skills, take the experiences, take the contacts.
Yeah.
And then, and then it was really 2018, 2019, then you decided to do, let's embrace food, take all of these skills, take all of this knowledge. You're in your early 30s, right?
Yeah.
Which is a great age to, I think,
love.
20s is all about, God, I'd much rather think back on my memories of Monster Munch.
Still drinking cheap white wine.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, already it was quite amazing because you did everything I think you filmed 8 episodes of, wasn't it 8 episodes the first series?
Yes.
On your own.
Yeah.
And you had no idea really how to go about it. It was just like sitting alone in your parents' bedroom, like kind of in a bedroom at your parents' house. But as soon as it released in 2020, within the first month, it was in like the top 10 UK podcasts. How did you do that?
I'm still trying to figure it out.
That's amazing. But okay, so for people, everyone should be tuning into her podcast, Crazy Sexy Food. It's amazing. It's now done 10 series.
Yes.
And it has a whole myriad of guests too, what I like in like different industries. Yes, you do talk to a lot of chefs, but then there's like people like Paul Feig, who I really, really love. And then, even people who I actually am like, oh, Millie McIntosh. Like, I didn't think she liked food that much.
Yeah.
But like, it's those kind of things where like, oh, that's like, it's very like interesting spectrum of people, sometimes at their homes, sometimes in restaurants, sometimes at your home. I really love it. But what do you think like kind of sets it apart from other food podcasts out there?
I mean, listen, I think this is what we're talking in 2024 now. I actually recorded the first season in 2019. And
then it came out in 2020.
And it came in 2020 just because of, I think by the time I'd got it edited, I didn't know what I was doing, Amelia. I mean, if you listen to that first season, I have edited it to an inch of its life. I've taken out every
No,
pause.
I deliberately listened to 3 or 4 from the first series.
I just won't do it.
I did it, but actually it's a really consistent high level, because I listened originally to like the later ones. I'm like, let's just go back. And actually it's a consistent high level.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just, but also I didn't know what I was doing. And I had just started listening to podcasts at the beginning of 2019. And I started listening to podcasts because I was training for a marathon, as you do.
Oh, we talked about the high-low.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. Good.
They
need to bring that back. That was a great podcast. But that was actually one of the first podcasts that I listened to. And what I got out from all of the ones that I loved, and, I'm very happy to mention podcasts that really influenced me, is that I took a little bit of what I liked from different podcasts and also different people's interviewing techniques. I wasn't stealing anyone's ideas. I was just simply like, I really like how that sort of sets the scene. I like this, I like that, whatever. As I said, we're speaking now, 5 years later, there's a lot of food podcasts out there. I know the competition is heavy, as with everything in life.
Yeah. How would you how do you keep yours authentic?
Yeah, and true? For me, I'm so genuinely interested in people. Like, we could be away from all of this. We could be at an event and I've just met you. We could be in the gym and we've just started chatting, whatever it is. I'm to the point of nosy. Like I've realized that I've always been like that. And kind of like back to what I was saying with like, as a photographer, that's why I think I started to do a lot more portraiture, because it allowed me to spend more time with people. So I would say my podcast, okay, it's about food. We don't necessarily eat food on the episode, because I'm really into getting into your relationship with food, your conversation with food, your nostalgic memories with food. And one thing that a lot of my guests have said is that you actually listen. Yeah. And I think, as an interviewer, and I've studied a lot of very famous presenters over the years. For me, someone that was one of the greats was someone like Michael Parkinson.
Parky.
Yeah, I mean, as a young girl, like, I would watch those shows on a Saturday night because I was just totally like envisioned by the way that he would get the stories out of people. Like, I just found it fascinating. And to be a good interviewer, you need to listen. And I've been told a couple things along the way. I have a lovely dear friend of mine called Hannah. Shout out Hannah, whose father was a TV presenter back in the day. And when I was starting out the podcast, I had a phone call with him. And it was just when COVID was just starting. And I sent him 2 of my episodes of this very, like, what I call my primitive season 1. And he called me up and he said, I like it, Hannah. I actually think it's really good. I think you've got a good voice. I think you've got a good tone. He said, and one thing that I really like, and one thing that I need you to remember as you move on with this, is when you are an interviewer, it is not about you, the presenter. It is not about the presenter. You are purely the vehicle between your guest and the audience. You are extracting the information from your guest, because that is why people are tuning into your TV show, your podcast, your radio show, whatever it is. You are purely the vehicle, and a successful presenter or interviewer is the one that can seamlessly get that out of somebody. And I remember that phone conversation. I remember where I was, where I was in life, and I remember that every single time I press record, because there can't be ego. And I think there's a lot of egos out there, particularly I think with what we do. It's not about us. And I think that your guests can see that.
But then again, it kind of ties into, again, that slight detachment. It's like, yes, I love what I do, but also being able to be objective and almost be a fly on the wall, which is kind of, again, goes back to your photography career.
Totally.
It's that like, yes, I love this, but it can't be all about my loves and my ego. Yeah. And it's about having that, I think that very healthy, slight detachment, slight objectivity, like, what's the real story here? And it's not about me.
I call myself a communicator. Like people say to me these days, oh, what do you do? And I still really stumble on what I was going to say I don't know how to answer it because I'm kind of like, oh, I don't want to say podcaster because I feel that keeps me in a really small box. I feel like imposter syndrome to say presenter because have I earned my stripes yet? I'm not really for shooting as much. So can I call myself a photographer? I'm kind of like this sort of communicator. That's kind of what I am. I communicate people's stories and
through various mediums.
But food kind of these days being the vehicle. Mm-hmm. So it's an interesting one. I'm still figuring it out.
Well, and you're still on a journey because that actually suits me nicely to say, like, obviously I mentioned at the beginning how, you 10 series of the podcast, you have wonderful shorts, like kind of like short films on your website, which I know is only going to grow and grow. And you have your YouTube channel where, like, can you ideally say, or is it too early to say, like, where, like, I never like the idea of like in 5 years time, because like, as we know, the last 5 years have been a complete shit show.
Jesus Christ.
But like, are there like kind of, can you see certain things which you've liked doing recently, which you'd like to explore more of?
Totally.
Or,
So I don't, some people do know this about me. Some people don't. I don't know if you do, but when I started Crazy Sexy Food, it was never meant to be a podcast. The podcast simply started because I was looking back on some of my videos that I'd started putting on YouTube. And I literally said to myself, I think you need to practice a bit of your interviewing technique. That was purely why I started it. And I will also please say a massive shout out to my husband, because I genuinely, and I don't want it to be all gushy, but I genuinely would not be here today if it wasn't for him pushing me to do all the things that I do, because I'm very much an idea person. I'd be like, yeah, I think I should do this, but there's no way someone like me could do that. No, how am I going to do a podcast?
Because he's a creative.
He is a creative, but he was like, buy a couple microphones, good quality, get a Zoom and go and start recording. And I'm like, no, I can't do that. He's like, I don't understand. So it was those kinds of conversations that were happening in sort of 2018. So I'm just trying to remember what we were just, hold on, that's my train of thought. So basically the initial idea was, and I'm going to try and keep this as short as possible, but I had always had this, and I need to stop saying that I was embarrassed by it, but I always wanted to be a TV presenter when I was like in my late teens. But you can't just say you want to be a TV presenter. Well, who are you? What are you wanting to communicate? What is your thing? I didn't have a thing. I was just like, I think I'd be quite good at it. Because I was from the outside, quite a confident person. I was bubbly. I could pretty much talk to a tree and have a conversation. So I just thought that I'd be quite good at it. And I did try and attempt it at some point. We won't go into that, but didn't really go anywhere. And that's when I got into my photography career. So off the back of the photography career, sort of 2018, 2019, I had really immersed myself a lot in food TV shows, but not sort of the chopping and chatting. I grew up in that era of Delia Smith and I don't know, like Rick Stein and Keith
And your
Floyd.
dad was on Ready, Steady, Cook.
He was. He was. That's a very embarrassing moment in my life. No, not the fact that he went on, but the fact that when they zoomed in on him chopping an onion, he was chopping with the wrong side of the knife. So it's safe to say my dad is not a cook. We have a private joke in my family that he can't even make toast, because you know when he's made toast because he burns it in the toaster every time. But we love him. Love you, Dad. But I was really interested in sort of these documentary style TV shows. So obviously like the late Anthony Bourdain, which for me is kind of like the messiah of that type of show. What I was noticing was that there weren't any young, cool females fronting these types of shows. They were all of the Nigellas. I actually knew very well at the time when they were coming up the ranks was the Hemsley sisters. And I love all of these people. I have the utmost respect for them. But I was really interested in kind of the nitty gritty. Yeah. Let's kind of get inside. I want to know what these stories are all about, what essentially what Anthony was doing. So again, my husband sort of piped up and was like, well, why don't we film something? And I'm like, well, I don't know how to do that. I can't film something. And he's like, look, sit down, write a one-pager, write a treatment. A treatment, for anyone who doesn't know, is basically write down the idea of the show that you want to create. So I wrote down an idea. I wrote down a synopsis. And we spent a year filming the first episode. The first episode was very, very simple. I didn't want to try and create something that I couldn't achieve. It was purely about street food culture and pop-ups in London. At the time, I'm at the height of my career, my photography career. So, things took a bit of time. We eventually put it out at the end of 2019. And that is why I set out Crazy Sexy Food, was to start creating that type of content. Obviously, we know what happened in 2020. We went into lockdown, the podcast came out. Suddenly I can't go out and interview people. I can't go to restaurants. I can't go and film the content that I want to. So I look back in hindsight now and I see that what's happened is, in an amazing way, is that the podcast is what I've now become very known for. And that 2 years of lockdown allowed me to do that because we can record remotely.
Yeah,
I just churned it out because what else was I going to do? I had no photography career for 2 years.
No baby.
No baby, bloody hell. And I just kept going. And so when you ask me, what is the vision? Well, what is the future? Well, the future, and, again, I've got to stop saying, I feel embarrassed to say this, but I want to do stuff for TV. I want to create that kind of content that I wish I had seen when I was younger. And I everything I think starts with an idea and a little bit of self-belief. And I do believe that one day I can get there. I've cracked open the food, Amelia. I mean, we're just going for it.
I know, I love it. I mean,
it's all going to go. It's all going to fall apart now.
It's not. And actually, I'm really because I was like, I knew already kind of where the idea had germinated. And I think we're quite similar in lots of ways. And so I thought that maybe I could ask you the question slightly differently, like, where can you see it going? But really, it's kind of what, again, is like the inspiration behind all of this and the vision. And you answered that perfectly. And actually, it does make me think of when you interviewed Paul Feig, and that was about 1.5 years.
Gosh, yeah.
Ago.
Yeah.
Because you were talking, again, we've mentioned before the pitfalls of how the industry has changed, social media has changed everything for everyone. The wine world has changed the food world. But actually, what I quite liked in his comment, because you were talking about, is it actually now harder for people to get roles or actually and he was like saying actually there's more opportunities for people because, there's like so many more programs and so many more channels that there's like opportunities for actors and actresses. And he's like, but also it's the fact that you can just put yourself out there, whether it's on YouTube, whether it's a podcast, whether it's whatever. And you don't have to play the game. You can have things more on your own terms, which Absolutely. I think both you and I, being like female, running our own businesses, working in industries which tend to be male dominated. We've got lots of scars on our back. And I think what I really love doing, like why I love doing this podcast, is that I can have 100% control and 100% creative input. Absolutely. And I can choose the people I want to work with and who I trust.
And listen, that is such a huge privilege to be able, I say to people, to just be able simply to do what you love is such a privilege in this world, because I understand that not everyone is in this position. And, at one point I did love the photography, and I still love the photography. And that's why I'd never want to badmouth it. But it just wasn't the whole of my story. I just knew that.
Yeah.
One thing else I just really want to touch on, because I never really normally talk about it, and it is really important for me, is that when I was growing up, food was hugely positive in my life and massively celebrated, from my mum teaching me about food, from buying good ingredients to cooking to eating and whatever. But I really, really struggled with my weight particularly as a teenager, and struggled to a point where there were quite a few years where I really disliked myself.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that I looked at food as the reason. And I would say I haven't had a bad relationship with food. But when I go back to making that comment about I wanted to see someone that looked like me on TV, I never felt like I saw that growing up. And I know that that's purely as well because I was growing up in the 90s when the aesthetic and the ideal was very much not what it is today.
No.
And for anyone who is younger than me and is growing up, and they're even in their 20s at this point,
they won't know.
The 90s were really tough for anyone that had an ounce of curve on them whatsoever, So because it was very much that sort of heroin chic, super skinny, everything, which was totally not what I was and not what I am now.
Yeah.
And I think that I just want to, if there was ever anyone out there who was struggling, who is struggling like I was when I was younger and would look at myself in the mirror and thought that I was ugly purely because of the way that I looked, I want to be able to just change that narrative that it's okay to sit here. Like I said to you, the moment I walked in here today, I said, I'm going to be eating this food.
Yeah. And
I don't care if my job is to eat on camera. So I don't care what I look like. I don't give a crap because I love food. That is what I live for. And if I can't be excited by that, then what is the point as far as I'm concerned? And if that means that I've got a few extra pounds around my waist, then so be it.
But you're also absolutely gorgeous. And it's not even that matters, but I know what you mean.
It's just so important for me to also kind of have that message out there. And I don't even need to talk about it on my channels. And I'm happy to, but I haven't really had the opportunity to do it. But that's why it's so important for me to keep doing what I'm doing and kind of trying to create that pathway for myself, because I think I'm kind of speaking to the younger Hannah to be like, you know what, it was all okay. It was going to be fine. You were going to do what you loved. And guess what? It involved food, which was the thing that you thought was the reason why you looked the way that you looked or whatever it was.
It is a kind of love letter.
It is a love letter.
It's an embrace.
100%,
it's nourishing
100%.
That inner child.
So,
Not to get too woo-woo. I am quite woo-woo though. I was going to say, who do you admire, in terms of women out there putting themselves out there? And it could be in food, or it could be content creators, or it could be entrepreneurs who you think really put themselves out there and are really inspiring.
So I've actually interviewed two women that I'm going to mention. And there's one woman who is on my hit list who I hope one day she listens to this and so she can come on my podcast. So I've had the honor of interviewing Asma Khan, who is a wonderful Indian chef and has a restaurant in London called Darjeeling Express. She has a fascinating story. I discovered her from Chef's Table, which is that wonderful series on Netflix. What's wonderful about her, her story is very complex. And it involves a lot to do with her heritage, her Indian heritage, being a female in an environment where females are not necessarily regarded as highly as men, and the battles that she has had to fight throughout her personal life and her career. And having her on the podcast for me was one of the greatest honors, because she has achieved so much. To the point where we are talking maybe 3 or 4 years ago, she still was not being given a lease on a restaurant site because the male landlord didn't trust that she would succeed. And that conversation is in my podcast. I'm not sort of, saying something on her behalf, but for me, I think what she's achieved is incredible. I also, and a lot of people might not know her by name, but you'll probably know her brand, is a wonderful lady called, I'm not going to get her name right. Hold on. Shiza Shahid. She is the girl who started Our Place.
No way.
Which is the cookware brand.
Yeah.
Really interesting lady. I think she's similar age to me. And she is from Pakistan. And she is very good friends with Malala. Malala being girl who was shot by the Taliban, over 10 years ago, I think now.
Yeah.
Really, what I love about her ethos of the brand is essentially what Crazy Sexy Food is about, but she's made for cookware, which is about conversations over food. Come to our place, come to ours for dinner. And her brand is actually very good. And I use her pots and pans on a daily basis. Her story is incredible. What she has done for charities, for nonprofit organizations, what she has done with teaming up with Malala, I find mind-blowing. Incredible. So those two. And then one lady who I really admire as a fellow podcaster, and someone who also used adversity, switched it around, wrote a book, and now has probably the best highly rated podcast in the UK is Elizabeth Day. I think that she is amazing, and I'm pretty sure that I reckon her and I could be best friends. Elizabeth, call me. I just think what she's done is really interesting. You know, her conversation, she's nothing to do with the food world.
No.
You know, she wrote a book called How to Fail because I believe she found herself at the age of 38, divorced, no children, wrote a book. She was a journalist. And the book turned into the podcast, How to Fail. And I think it's really about that narrative, because guess what? We're all going to fail. We're all going to have something happen in our life. Nothing's going to go to plan. And she's changing the conversation and saying, well, actually, without failure, you can't succeed. And I've always stood by that. Yeah. And so, yeah, big fan of hers.
As I say, yeah, it's all about the scars on one's back.
Absolutely.
That's great. Oh my gosh, I could talk to you for hours, but I know that... I know I'm looking at the team, and I know we're going to have to move on to the next wine. So
really, I'm still on this one.
I'll try and cram in as many questions as possible with the next wine. But I'm so glad you like this wine
from me. I like this one.
Well, I know that you wanted a summer red.
Yes.
I know that you love Italy.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to choose a wine which... I adore the winery. It's run by was run. The husband unfortunately died in 2021, Lionel. But he used to run this winery with his wife, and I know that you run your company with your husband. And
always going to love that you've said that. Oh, here we go. I'm never going to hear the end of this one.
He helps you with your company, but you definitely work together.
Keep that in.
You work together. And as well as being delicious wine, I also thought you'd approve the label. Not saying that labels are everything when it comes to wine, but as soon as I brought this out, you noticed the tiger on the front.
Ooh.
And it's because, this is a wine from Tuscany, from Montalcino, and they do make Brunello, which is made by 100% Sangiovese. But what they've done now, this is the 5th edition. So for the last few editions of this special blend, they work with a local friend who's an artist, and for the 5th edition, they decided to go with a tiger. And this particular edition is a really interesting wine where it's basically taking the grapes from the 2018 and 2019 harvest and being like, they're not ready enough to like be made into a Brunello, which needs to age or whatever. But we can see them, if we blend them together, we can see them kind of evolving, taking a bit like of a different tangent, but creating an equally beautiful wine, but it's not going to be a traditional Brunello del Montalcino. Mm-hmm. So I'm all about kind of hybrid careers, multifaceted careers, maybe not going down conventional routes, taking a bit of time and then evolving into a beautiful, unique expression.
So cool.
And this wine is also special to me because the 2018 and 2019 were like Lionel, who I visited the winery. He died in 2021. So he oversaw these two harvests and oversaw the making of this wine. So they have like a wonderful Brunello. They make a very serious wine called Ombrone. But this it's meant to be like wine for friends, wine for like copain. But actually it's a pretty fun, serious wine. It's called Vino Rosso Cupano, just mean like a red blend, 80% Sangiovese.
Lovely.
20% Merlot. So again, like plummy and fruity, whatever. And it's aged in wood, like I think just not for as long, basically, as a Brunello. I think it's just like for a year and a half. But I just thought it's a beautiful wine, and I'll tell you a little bit more after we've had it too. But you were wanting a kind of summer red, and this, I think, it's a beautiful wine, and it's perfect for summer. Yeah, I think by having that, you don't often get these like multi-vintage blends where you have 2018, 2019. But I think it actually gives a really interesting spin.
There's something about the smell of a good red that's like a hug.
Oh yeah, this totally envelops you.
Oh, yes.
And what I like is like you do get the plushness on the nose of kind of like the dark plum fruit or whatever, but also I get, which is what I love, is that slight, I love sun-dried tomatoes. I noticed that I brought out like Brazil and sun-dried tomatoes. What I like to get from like particularly like a really good like Sangiovese, which has had a bit of age, is that yes, you get the fruit, but you get that slightly sweet vegetal thing, like which you get in a sun-dried tomato, as tomatoes are fruit. And like, I love that on the, like, you particularly get it more on the palate than on the nose, but
That is beautiful. That is gorgeous.
I feel like you get the blackberry fruit, you get like some kind of ripe sun-dried, like some kind of sweetness, but it's more like a vegetal, like a really gorgeous sweetness. And then you have the clove spice, which I love from the oak. And it's just like really juicy and delicious. I could have put it in the fridge for maybe 20 minutes.
So this is my question where I get a bit confused with red wine.
Yeah.
So you're saying this is like a good summer red.
Yeah.
So would you chill this?
You could. I actually forgot to. I was so engrossed in the conversation. I'd meant to, after the first wine, put this in the fridge. Because even though people are like, oh, you should only do it for Pinot Noir or like light body. And I would say this is a medium to full bodied wine.
But it's still so interesting though. Yeah. See, I would never go, if someone said to me, oh, this is a full bodied wine, I'd be like, oh no, that's not what I want. So I clearly don't know what I want.
Well, I think like this is medium to full, like it's not.
I would say it's definitely medium.
Medium plus, or like Wine and Spirit Education Trust, medium plus. But that's obviously not how we navigate in life, thank God. But yeah.
Okay.
So it's going that way. But I think because it is like lovely bright acidity, because it is lovely perfume there, all of those things can be heightened when you put it. Because actually also the fact that Sangiovese people compare to Pinot Noir because of its perfume. Merlot, it's not high in tannin. I think certain things which are like a Malbec, which are like super high in tannin, super high in alcohol, that can just all be exacerbated. But I think actually just like putting this in, because it is such a warm day, I could have put it in for 20 minutes and then that would only enhance more of the clove spice, more of the fruit flavors. I think, again, I was thinking of somewhere, because I know that you love like your like pizza. And I was thinking like if you're having like pizza parties, or I've got Brazil and sun-dried tomatoes here, cheese boards, whatever grows together. Pecorino being from Tuscany. I thought that could be a good wine choice. Or there's like a Gorgonzola Dolce, which I thought actually has like the creaminess, and it would be lovely to kind of suffuse it together. So as well as that story, I didn't realize about him. So I've been to his winery. He's amazing. Everything is organic, biodynamic. He was so precise in his sustainability, Lionel, that he was actually known to cut some of his vines with like a toe clipper just to get the precision right on the shoots and stuff. Like he's very, very precise. But actually they met, him and his wife, Ornella, they met in Chad in 1977. I'm going to bring up my notes because I only learned this recently. While they were both living with the rebels in the desert, he was filming a documentary about them, and she was writing a book with Marie-Laure de Decker. So they then fell in love. They ended up like moving to a small island, Filicudi, in like the Elian Archipel, which was very remote at the time. No electricity, no current water, very rustic. Then they moved to Paris, where Lionel resumed his job as director of photography. So I wanted to link it into your photography.
Oh, you're clever.
Where he met Otar Lossiliani, the Georgian film director, well known for movies like Falling Leaves and Pastoral and Favorites of the Moon and all of that. So he worked for him in Paris. But then he got into a motor, I did know about this, he got into a bike accident and he lost the sight of one eye, which obviously when you're in photography, that's hard. But Ornella had just bought this estate in Tuscany. So they ended up moving Tuscany to Montalcino. And he just, basically, this is his second career. They created this exceptional estate called Cupano. And so he actually had help from Burgundian wine legend Henri Geur, who looked after like Vosny Romani in Burgundy. So they're like working with who's also very into organics, biodynamics, and just being as sustainable as possible. And they're like right by the Ombrone River, which is why their kind of top wine is called Ombrone. It's this really dark, deep, broody, and that you do need to age for a bit. And actually the last time I was there, I just checked actually while doing this podcast, and I was like, oh, I've still got a couple of bottles of 2006, which I bought, off Lionel there. And so no, it's like, for me, it's a beautiful story. Second careers, husband and wife team, photography. And again, like I'm just thinking, gosh, yeah, he actually had a help in this. It's a one way to appreciate a friend. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, Amelia, cheers to you for a second, honestly, for one, being so thoughtful in finding these wines for me, but also getting me a little tipsy drunk on some brilliant alcohol. And the stories.
My pleasure. No,
I mean, I want this, as you said, it's not just about the outside. But I love that because I would keep that bottle.
Yeah.
I've only kept one bottle of wine for visual purposes in my home. But I need to get this because one, I want to drink it, and two, I want to add it to my collection of one.
No, absolutely. And this is again, it's from Swig, who specialize in these amazing producers, amazing stories. And I think I think it's about £35.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's not cheap, but actually when you think of the labor of love and the quality, and I say, even just for the bottle alone, it's
gorgeous.
People will stop and ask, like, what are we drinking?
Love this.
I'm so
I said to you, I was going to be very honest with you. And I was sort of like, I say this in the nicest way. I kind of wanted you to give me a wine that I was going to be a bit like challenge you on. And I haven't been able to do that because I like all of them a lot.
Well, wait until we get to the wine and crisp pairings and
here we go.
But, well, I know we have to wrap up soon, but I am really interested in this. Like, this is also kind of why I got this wine out too. They're a husband and wife team. They've managed to make it work. How do you manage to make it work with your husband?
Oh God, read between the laughter. Okay, so we need to set the scene here, is that I've come from a family of a husband and wife duo. My parents have been working together since before I was born. It's all I know. And it is purely by coincidence that I'm now sort of working, or Leo is working alongside me with what I do. I mean, he completely has his own business, but it's within production, and he does a bit of acting and this and that. So it's very challenging. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I saw it with my parents. I still see it with my parents, and I see it with Leo and I. It's amazing to be able to work with your partner on whatever level. You're both sort of fighting and working for the same
supporting
thing
each other.
and supporting each other. And it's someone that I know I can speak to every single day that isn't going to bullshit me, isn't going to do me over, isn't going to lie to me, isn't going to say what I want to hear. I don't want yes people around me. I want people that are going to tell me the truth and say when something isn't really working. But it comes with its challenges because one, where's the balance between work and pleasure or life, whatever you want to call it? And also it's all encompassing. I'm very open, like every relationship has arguments, of course we have our moments. And it can be tough, but as a whole, it's wonderful. It's very rewarding.
Do you find it also easier? Because I was also thinking, how do you do TV, podcasts, events, and have a 3.5-month-old baby? It's amazing. Who's really cute.
I don't know. I'm still trying to figure it out myself.
But do you think it helps then having a partner who you
I think so.
with?
So where Leo kind of comes in is that he shoots all of my content. So he in terms of shooting, logistics, he will shoot my podcast and sort of all of the content that you see on social media. When it comes to sort of the producing side, so me doing the research or finding guests or whatever, I have someone who sort of helps out part-time.
Nice.
And then it's also mainly I oversee everything. Yes, I'm a control freak. Not sure if you realized it. But I don't really like delegating things. But everything else is very much me. In terms of sort of live events, in terms of TV stuff, he's not really involved in that. But I think what's actually quite wonderful about Leo in that sense is that, and I hope he doesn't mind me saying this, he wasn't a foodie when I met him, and he's still learning a lot through me. And so he's not there to tell me about the next best restaurant or the chef that I need to have on. He's there on a real sort of quite serious, deep sort of level, which is, this is how it should look. Go and fight for that. Go and put yourself forward for this. Believe in yourself about that, because I think that's what I need. All the other stuff I can do.
Yeah.
So actually he's picking up where I'm not so good at or as strong as. And that's what you need.
That's what you need. Because I was going to say too, I think being women anyway, we're very hard on ourselves. We have to, as we mentioned, sometimes you just have to push yourself more than male counterparts. And you've mentioned before, and I totally relate to this, the idea of imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
How do you overcome, like I have to, like it's so hard. Like and people are like, you're so brave. But I'm like, oh, you don't know like sometimes the daily struggles or like just literally just being out of my comfort zone a lot of the time. How do you get over the kind of the inner voices of like imposter syndrome?
Honestly, Amelia, I think I'm just faking it till I make it. I'll be completely honest. I don't have like a perfect answer. I think that whether you like it or not, I'm talking about the people that are just starting to enter whatever it is they want to do with their lives, where they've just left university or they've just left school, all the way up to the biggest superstars in the world. I think everyone has an imposter syndrome at some point in their lives. At some point, you are going to be in a room and you're going to be like, why am I here? What am I doing here? Do I deserve to be here? Are they going to figure it out?
Yeah.
Are they going to figure out that like I shouldn't be here? The amount of times, and I'm sure, you know, as you said, you've admitted to it, that I have sat across the table from someone at filming a podcast or doing TV or doing live events thinking, why me? And actually, it goes back to your question before that, is that I'm very, very lucky to have someone in my life who does believe in me. And literally, as I was leaving today, was saying to me how much he felt like I had grown. You know, he still will say when I've messed up, or he'll still say, I think you need to work on that. That's what I need.
Yeah.
But back to sort of the imposter syndrome thing. You know what? At the end of the day, I'm kind of just like, life is so goddamn short. I'm 36 years old. I finally took the plunge at 32 to change my life around. No one believed I could really do it. I can guarantee you and say that half the people in my life do not listen to my podcast. That's fine. I don't care. I'm doing this for me. I don't do this for anyone else. I'm trying to pave the life that I want for myself.
Yeah.
No one's going to do it for me. And if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. But at least I tried. And I think that's something that I've always done in my life, is that I've always tried something, whatever it might be. If I don't try and do it, how can I say whether it worked or it didn't? You know, I'm not embarrassed. If tomorrow everything implodes on itself and it doesn't work, I don't feel like my first emotion will be embarrassment. It will be, you know what? It was a good run.
Yeah.
It was great.
And you don't have any what ifs.
It was great while it lasted.
You don't have any what ifs.
No.
We'll say that way too.
Because then I will regret it. And I have this very silly saying, I don't know if other people have it. I don't keep regrets in my life. I've made a hell of a lot of mistakes.
Oh, yeah, me too.
Yeah. And I own up to all of them, but I will never, ever keep a regret, because for me, regrets hinder me from moving forward. So that's how I feel.
Cheers to that.
Cheers to that.
Oh,
getting all serious.
Well, we'll end on a slightly lighter note. Actually, before we get onto the wine confessional, I just have like one other question, because one thing which I just think is so awesome is that you took yourself off to Brazil for a month without your husband and just like seemed to have the most wonderful time. And I actually love traveling on my, if I know that it's for a specific time and whenever I can plan it, like I think that there's nothing more self-affirming and empowering. Where would you, and I know that you love Italy, and that gives you a lot of inspiration for food and creativity. Where is your next on to visit list for food, drink, and just general creative inspiration?
So kind of like the dream trip is Japan.
Yes.
Had I had not got pregnant last year, the plan was that we were going to go to Japan and kind of do this big trip. So we've put that on hold for a couple of years or so.
Yeah.
However, people have said apparently Japan's a really good place to take babies, but you know what, we'll see. So Japan is the place that I would desperately love to go. One, because I haven't touched a lot of that part of the world. I think the furthest east I've been is sort of India, Sri Lanka. So I actually haven't touched Southeast Asia at all.
Yeah.
And the other dream trip would be to get in an old car and drive around Italy. Which I feel like is more durable, actually.
That is much more doable.
Yeah, at the
and
moment,
with the baby,
for sure.
yeah.
I reckon we could do it.
They love babies over there.
Yeah, exactly. And also, I'm very much of the mindset, I'm a modern mother. The baby's going to fit into my life. So there we go.
Yes.
So he will be coming wherever I go, whether he likes it or not. Set the tone as you want your rest of your life to go.
Exactly. I totally agree to that. No regrets. Give it a go.
No, exactly. There you go.
And Before you leave, I always say to my guests, we have the wine confessional.
Yeah.
We have to share a story or a memory which involves wine. And it could be hilarious. It could be embarrassing, preferably both, or just memorable.
Okay. So I wasn't sure which story. I mean, there's actually many. Most of them just involve me being very drunk and disorderly and then, whatever. But during COVID, or just before COVID, sorry, my brother bought Leo and I a beautiful wine tasting experience. And I don't remember the name. I actually genuinely don't remember the name, but it was a hotel in London.
Okay.
And then COVID happened, so it was delayed for about 2 years.
Yeah.
Finally, we were allowed out and we go and do it. And it was the reason I feel like it was around the time of the Euros, weirdly, not the one that's just been, but the one that was delayed a year.
Yeah,
so I think 2021 or 2, maybe 20, I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah.
We go to this wine tasting. Now, my husband is not a massive drinker, by the way. Which doesn't mean anything to me. I still crack on. But we do this thing because I really wanted to learn about wine. And I have done wine tasting before in South Africa.
Oh, great.
Yeah. Got really drunk there as well. Anyway, what I didn't really know. So there was 11 wines. I think we started off with sort of 5 reds. There was a rosé during lunch. Then, 5 whites, rosé, and then reds at the end. You tell me what the rule of thumb is, but you're kind of not necessarily, you don't need to drink everything that's in the glass.
No.
Right, well, I did.
Well, I mean, also, if it's like, it's different for me. Like if I'm going to a wine tasting, that's a work thing.
I'm a bit of a lightweight. I don't know if you've noticed it, because I think I'm just starting to become a bit bleh.
I'm going to get you onto Miracle.
Oh, here we go. What's that? Here we go. Yeah, I need that.
Tablets.
I got so drunk during this wine tasting that by the time I got to my 5th red, so I'm now on my 11th wine, I've practically licked the whole glass of every single wine that was there. I then started heckling the person that has started, that has been presenting this whole experience, to the point where I've got my hand up asking loads of questions. She's now ignoring me, and I had to be taken home by my husband and put to bed. And that was the last time I've done wine tasting, and probably the last ever.
We did a wine tasting today.
Okay. Yeah, well, we did, but this was, no. It wasn't my finest moment. But all I'm saying is that the hotel was on Piccadilly, and whoever saw me on the Piccadilly line on that particular Saturday, it wasn't me.
Well, you fully got involved and embraced it. Yeah, and actually, it's just as well that your husband doesn't drink as much, because then he can take you home.
There was a responsible adult.
Oh, well, Hannah, I could literally talk to you for hours. Actually, on our prelim call, which was meant to be 15 minutes, we did talk for 2 hours. So I'm sure we'll wrap up and there'll be more talking. But I just want to say thank you so much. I do genuinely find you so inspiring. I find there's like a lot of similarities in our kind of our trajectories. And I just always find it very inspiring, because I see it a lot in the States, but I find it, I don't know, there's like not as many people like trying out different things, I think, in the UK. I'm starting to see more. But I just really love you give things a go. You embrace you're enthusiastic, give things a go. That does not mean that you're not, obviously, you're business savvy. But yeah, I love everything about it, and the fact that you can work with your husband and you can do it with a 3.5-month-old baby. These are all amazing goals. There is
blood, sweat and tears behind the scenes. Trust me. This is the other thing I will say, like, okay, I know that I'm still very early days, but I'm not going to say it takes a village. It does take a village, but we do have family support around us, and it has been the roller coaster of a 3 months, but nothing's going to stop me. No, you were on TV last night. Yeah. Rocking it with Michael Patillo. You look great. When you got a vision, I got to keep going. And also, I guess I'm trying to show my son that, if you want something, go and get it. Yeah. No one's going to give it to you. Only you who's going to hold you back. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'm definitely on my way to drunkenness, and I'm very happy because I got a cheese board in front of me. So. And now you know that you also like white wine. I know. I can't believe it.